His hand gripped the back of my thigh so hard it made me gasp, my breath catching in my throat, as he pushed into me slow but insistent. I bit my lip to keep from making a sound, tasting the faint tang of blood, the pressure of him stretching me more than I was ready for. We were in the narrow hallway, just off the laundry room, the door to the kitchen half open. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the soft tick of the old clock on the wall, every sound amplified by the fear that anyone might walk past and see what we were doing. I braced a hand on the washer, the cool metal grounding me while my knees threatened to buckle. His breath was hot against the side of my neck, ragged breaking with each slow, careful push. "I can't." "Slow down," he whispered, voice hoarse, his fingers tightening where they dug into my skin. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I felt the thick weight of him press deeper, my whole body tensing, trembling, wanting to pull away, and wanting more all at once. I bit down harder on my lip, eyes squeezed shut, trying to fight the heat that bloomed low in my belly, the guilt that wrapped around every sharp breath I took. I never imagined I'd cross this line. I never thought I'd be the woman clutching the edge of a washing machine, while someone I wasn't supposed to even look at that way, pressed in so deep I couldn't catch my breath. He wasn't mine to want. He was half my age, barely 26, someone who'd come into my life by chance and slipped under my skin before I realized how far it had gone. I'm 39, a mother, a wife. I run a household pay bills, keep the calendar of birthdays and doctor's appointments in my head so my husband doesn't have to think about anything except his job. I thought I was safe from this kind of mistake, from wanting something I could never have. But the moment he closed the door behind him, the moment he stepped close enough that I could feel the heat coming off his skin, I stopped being someone I recognized. What would you do if the one person you were supposed to protect was the one you ended up craving in secret? He moved deeper, a low groan tearing out of him that made me shiver. I felt the tears prick at the corners of my eyes, the guilt so thick in my chest I thought I might choke on it. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice rough, his forehead pressing into my shoulder. I didn't answer. I didn't push him away. I let it happen. If you've ever lived with a secret that made you ache and burn at the same time, this story might speak to you more than you'd like. Please like and subscribe. The more you watch, the more stories like this will find others holding back the same truth. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to my husband, listening to the soft snore rumble in his chest, staring up at the ceiling fans spinning slow circles overhead. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hallway, the way the light spilled across the linoleum floor, the way his hands trembled when he gripped my thigh, the way I didn't pull away. The guilt felt like acid in my stomach, but underneath it, coiled so tight it made my skin prickle, was the memory of the heat of him against me, the raw need in his voice, the way it had made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. I've spent most of my adult life taking care of other people. My husband works long hours. I used to think that was for us, for the house, the kids, the future we'd built together. Now, sometimes I think it's just easier for him not to look at me at all. We don't fight. We don't touch. We move around each other in the house like polite strangers, saying the right words, never raising our voices. But in the middle of the night when I reach out for him, he turns away in his sleep without even knowing it. I told myself it was enough, that loneliness was just part of life, something you swallow down and push past because other people need you to keep moving. Then he came into our lives. He was helping with the garage renovation, a friend's son who needed the work, who showed up on time every day with a shy smile and steady hands. He'd been polite, careful always, offering to carry the heavy boxes, to fix the stuck drawer in the kitchen, to clean up his messes so I wouldn't have to. At first, I barely noticed him. I was too busy juggling appointments, errands, the endless churn of bills and chores. But he kept showing up, quiet, respectful, looking at me in a way that made me feel seen, even if I tried to ignore it. He asked about my day. He noticed when I was tired. He watched me with a softness that made my stomach twist, in a way I hadn't felt since I was young. I told myself it was harmless, that I was older, that I knew better, that he was just being kind. But the way he lingered in the doorway when I bent to pick something up, the way he brushed against me in the narrow hallway, the way his voice went low when he said my name, it built something in me I didn't know how to bury. One afternoon he stayed late to help with a leaky pipe under the sink. My husband was working late, and the house was quiet, except for the drip of water and the faint hum of the fridge. He was on his knees, his shirt riding up just enough that I could see the line of muscle at his lower back, the flush of pink skin where the waistband of his jeans dipped. I should have looked away, but I didn't. And when he stood turning toward me with his hands still damp and reached up to brush a stray hair from my cheek, I felt something in me shift, a crack running through the careful shell I'd built around myself for years. I think part of me wanted it to happen, even if I couldn't admit it then. After that day in the hallway, I told myself it wouldn't happen again. I told myself I'd be stronger, that I'd shut it down before it turned into something worse. But every time he came into the house, every time I heard the soft creak of the back door opening, every time he said my name in that low voice that seemed to catch at the edges, my resolve cracked just a little more. It was the smallest things that undid me. The way he'd stand too close when handing me something, a tool, a cup of coffee, a scrap of paper with measurements scrawled in his messy handwriting, the brush of his fingers over mine that lasted a beat too long, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. He'd started helping with small repairs around the house, staying later each time claiming the job was bigger than he thought. At first, I told myself it was convenient. My husband worked late most nights anyway, barely glancing at the house when he came in too tired to notice the steady hum of another man filling the empty spaces where he used to be. But the longer he stayed, the more I started to dread the moment he left. The way the silence settled in the house after the door shut, the way I stood in the kitchen, clutching the counter, my arms pinned tight to my sides so I wouldn't tremble. One evening after dinner, I found him in the garage sorting through boxes. My husband had fallen asleep on the couch, the TV flickering quietly. I stood in the doorway, hugging my arms around myself, trying to think of something to say that wouldn't break me open. He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag, his eyes flicking over me in the dim light. "You don't have to watch me work," he said softly. I lied, shifting from foot to foot. I just needed a minute. He set the rag aside, stepping close enough that I could smell the sweat and sawdust clinging to his shirt. "You always look like you're holding your breath," he whispered. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but the words came out thin, weak. His hand twitched at his side like he wanted to touch me, but was fighting it. "You don't have to pretend with me," he murmured. "Don't," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I can't help it," he breathed. Neither of us moved. The quiet hum of the fridge in the next room felt deafening. The next morning, I avoided him, making myself busy with errands and phone calls, ignoring the soft knock on the back door when he showed up. But that night, I lay awake thinking about the way his breath had hitched when he looked at me, the way his voice broke when he whispered my name. A few days later, I found myself alone in the kitchen again, wiping down the counters just to keep my hands busy. He walked in without knocking, his hair damp from the rain, his eyes dark and tired. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, clutching the dish towel, so hard my knuckles went white. "I couldn't stay away," he said. His voice shook a little, like he hated himself for the truth of it. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat coming off his skin, the way his breath caught. "Don't," I whispered again, but I didn't move. His hand brushed mine, slow, careful, almost like he was asking permission. I let out a soft breath, tears pricking at my eyes. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered. "Please," I said, though I didn't finish the sentence. He leaned in, his lips brushing my temple, his breath hot against my skin. "Tell me to leave," he murmured, voice rough. But I didn't say anything. Later, lying in bed beside my husband, I felt like I was split in two. Part of me wanted to run to confess everything, to beg someone to drag me out of the fire before I burned us all down. The other part wanted him to come back to touch me again, to keep pulling me further into something I couldn't stop. I tried to hold on to the guilt, to let it drown the wanting. But each day it got harder to tell the difference between the two. It happened on a Friday afternoon, when the sky turned the color of old bruises, heavy clouds hanging low enough that it felt like the whole world might break open. I'd spent the morning cleaning, scrubbing the kitchen counters, until my hands were raw, trying to focus on anything except the gnawing ache in my chest. The rain started soft, a faint hiss against the window. I thought I was alone until I heard the back door creak open, slow, careful. My breath caught in my throat before he even stepped inside. "I told you not to come here," I whispered, clutching the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles went white. He shut the door behind him, his hair wet and curling at the edges, his shirt plastered to his chest. "I tried," he breathed, his voice rough, strained. "I swear to God I tried." I shook my head, but I didn't move. I couldn't. He crossed the room in 3 steps, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. He stopped just inches away, close enough I could feel the heat coming off his skin, the raw trembling of his hands as he reached for me. "Don't," I whispered, though my voice cracked at the end. "Tell me to stop," he said, his forehead resting against mine, his breath shaking. "Tell me you don't want this." I opened my mouth. No words came out. He kissed me hard, hungry, his hands sliding under my shirt, rough and calloused against the soft skin of my ribs. I let out a soft, broken sound, clutching the counter behind me as he pressed me back, his body pinning me against the cold tile. I shouldn't. I breathed, though my hands slid up his arms, nails digging into his damp shirt. I know he whispered, his mouth brushing my jaw, hot and desperate. God, I know. He lifted me onto the counter in one quick motion, the cold surface biting into the backs of my thighs. The rain slammed harder against the window, the kitchen filled with the sound of water and our ragged, uneven breathing. When he pressed against me, I felt the size of him thick and hot through the fabric of his jeans. I bit my lip, stifling a whimper, my whole body going tense as he pushed closer, the hard length of him pressing into the thin cotton between us. "Please," I whispered, though I didn't know if I was begging him to stop or to keep going. He gripped my hips so hard I knew there'd be bruises later, his breath coming out in shaky bursts. "I can't." "Slow down," he panted, his voice raw. He fumbled with my jeans, pushing them down just enough, his hands trembling as they traced the curve of my hips. My thighs, every inch of me, he'd never been allowed to touch until now. I let out a soft cry when he found me, his fingers rough but careful, his mouth on my neck, hot and wet and desperate. When he pushed inside, slow, careful, my breath caught in my chest. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, tears slipping down my cheeks as he buried himself deep, groaning low into my ear. "God, you feel..." He started, but the words fell apart, swallowed by a choked moan. I clung to his shoulders, my nails digging into his skin, the wet slap of rain against the window, mixing with the soft broken sounds that slipped from both of us. Every push felt like it might split me open, the guilt, and the need tangling so tight I couldn't breathe. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though he didn't stop. "I know," I gasped, my head falling back, my throat exposed as he pressed his mouth to the hollow just above my collarbone. The room felt too small, too hot, like the walls might collapse in on us if anyone saw what we were doing, if anyone heard the soft, pleading sounds that tore from my throat every time he pushed deeper. When it was over, he held me there, both of us trembling, the sound of the rain filling the empty spaces between our breaths. "I can't." "Stop," he whispered, his voice breaking. Neither could I. After he left that day, I stood in the kitchen for what felt like hours, the rain still beating against the windows, the cold draft seeping under the door and chilling me to the bone. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to breathe, trying to tell myself it was over, that I wouldn't let it happen again. But the ache didn't fade. It settled deep in my chest, heavy and sharp, pressing against my ribs until I thought I might break apart. That night, I cooked dinner, like nothing had happened. I set the table, poured the drinks, smiled when my husband made some offhand joke about the neighbor's barking dog. I nodded and murmured at the right moments, careful not to let my hands shake as I passed him the salt. But every time I blinked, I saw the way he looked at me, in the rain-soaked kitchen, the raw hunger in his eyes, the way he said my name like it was the only word he knew. I lay awake for hours that night, listening to the steady rhythm of my husband's breathing. When I finally slept, I dreamed of him, the heat of his hands, the rough scrape of his breath against my ear, the broken way he whispered, "I can't stop." In the morning, I found a text waiting on my phone. "I can't stop thinking about you. I'm sorry, but I can't." I set the phone face down on the counter, my chest tight, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly dropped my mug. He kept coming by, always with some excuse, a loose hinge, a crack in the drywall, a question about the garage project. I told myself I wouldn't let him get close again, that I'd be strong, that I'd shut it down before it turned into something worse. But every time he stepped into the house, the air changed. It felt like the world narrowed to the space between us. The soft brush of his shoulder against mine in the hallway, the lingering warmth of his fingers when he handed me a tool, the rough edge in his voice when he said my name. He started leaving notes tucked into the drawer where I kept the scissors, slipped under the stack of junk mail on the counter, hidden in the folds of a clean dish towel. "I can't stop wanting you. Tell me you don't feel this too. I'll leave if you tell me to. But I don't want to." I tore them up. I threw them away, but I couldn't stop reading them first, holding the paper in my hands so tight it crumpled my breath, shaking, as I fought the need that clawed at me every time I saw his handwriting. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the dark window at night, the pale smudge of my face, the hollow look in my eyes, and I didn't recognize myself. I started jumping at every noise. Every time the door creaked or the phone buzzed, my heart slammed against my ribs, terrified it would be him, terrified it wouldn't. We kept finding moments alone, small secret spaces in the quiet hum of the house. He'd brush past me in the hallway, his hand catching mine, for just a second, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "We can't keep doing this," I whispered, once clutching the edge of the counter so hard my fingers ached. I know he breathed his forehead, pressing into the side of my head, his voice breaking. But I don't know how to stop. Neither did I. Sometimes I hated him for it, for making me want him, for showing me how empty I'd been, how easy it was to crack open the shell I'd built around my life. Other times I hated myself more for letting him in, for wanting him so badly I couldn't think straight, for feeling more alive in the moments he touched me than I had in years. I tried to stay away. I cleaned every room in the house twice over, reorganized the pantry, scrubbed the grout in the bathroom tiles until my fingers were raw. I told myself the work would bury the need, smother it under the weight of daily life. But every time he came close, every time his voice brushed against my ear, the ground slipped out from under me all over again. I don't know if I want to stop, or if I just want to stop hating myself for not. It didn't fall apart all at once. It was small cracks. First, the way my husband started watching me across the dinner table. His brow furrowed, his mouth pressing into a thin line when I looked away. Then came the day my daughter found the crumpled note in the trash. One of his, the messy scrawl that I hadn't torn up well enough, the words still visible along the edge. She held it up to me, her eyes wide, confused. "Who wrote this?" she asked. I froze. My heart thudded in my chest, so loud I could barely hear her. "It's nothing," I whispered, snatching the paper from her hand, crushing it into a tight ball. But the suspicion was there, coiled behind her eyes. That night, I stood by the window, watching the street for his car. I knew he was avoiding me. He hadn't come by in days, hadn't texted, hadn't left any more notes. The house felt empty without him, the air too still, the silence too thick. Part of me wanted him to stay away. The other part wanted him to break down the door and tell me he didn't care, who found out that he couldn't breathe without me. A week later, I heard his voice in the hallway, soft, muffled talking to my husband. My blood ran cold. I stepped into the kitchen, clutching the edge of the counter, my breath coming in shallow gasps. They stood near the front door, talking about the garage repairs, about a payment he was supposed to pick up. He didn't look at me, not once. My husband handed him a check. His tone polite but stiff. "Don't come around anymore," he said. "We'll find someone else." His jaw tightened, his hand clenching around the folded check. He glanced past my husband, his eyes meeting mine, just for a second, a flash of pain of guilt of something I couldn't name before he turned and walked out the door. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my arms pinned tight to my sides. I kept waiting for the door to creak open, for the soft scrape of his boots on the floor, for his voice whispering my name in the dark. But the house stayed quiet. I've lived with guilt before, but not like this. Not when it tasted like comfort. Not when it made me feel more alive than I had in years.